Hello, and welcome back to another Picard review, the shockingly tone-deaf show that is generally not particularly well written, which all culminates into a series that is getting increasingly morally problematic as it goes on, with ever-growing concern about the real-world effects on the real lives of the people watching it, that somehow, every now and then, will manage to actually pull something off, which is probably why we're still here, honestly. I mean, we've come this far, sort of thing. And every now and then they do get something right. And let's not pretend that every single Trekkie isn't going to at least check out season 3 of Picard or TNG season 8. Like, we're at least going to check it out. So we might as well finish this. And also people like these reviews. But hey, I'm starting to judge the book before I read it. Although the name Monsters, not the most, promising given my concerns. Although I suppose you could flip it the other way. That's the thing, is you could be monsters. Like, it's monsters, right? It's going to be a double meaning thing. Monsters on two fronts, probably the good guys and the bad guys somehow. So it could be starting to address the moral flaws I've been bringing up, which is another reason, even if it's still bad, this season's going to be better on a binge, just like season 1. Because, if they really are starting to address their problems, or the finale is, spinning it around where they're pulling Girardi out of her cult indoctrination, you've still spent, 9-10 weeks where that's what you're doing. You just have the bad. I've been over this. I gave you an hour and a half last week, and I've also got something to do this evening, so I'm going to keep the intro shorter. This one's for me. But a few things I do have to say. First off, in last review, I think it was last time, I mentioned Will Wheaton voluntarily chose not to play Wesley Crusher. Either the article I read was wrong and has since been edited, because I swear it was very explicit, or I just misinterpreted it. That's not the case. It actually appears that Will Wheaton didn't even know about it until the announcement, which, yeah, I mean, that's not great. I'd hate to think, if I had to speculate, well, he's the face of Star Trek, as I said last time. He does the after shows and stuff, which are apparently still going on. I didn't really realize. But yeah, he does those after shows, and so it'd be kind of weird to have Will Wheaton on the after shows talking about the show he's in. I hope that's not the reason, because, for one, he's actually put all this work into the company. But beyond that, the show would still work. Are we I haven't seen it, but are we pretending that it's going to be, a completely unscripted thing where Will Wheaton isn't given prompts to bring up, and, that people wouldn't actually want to see him talking about that with the cast of TNG. But yeah, I had to clarify that. Secondly, I also did this last week, but I forgot to mention, we got the new logo. Yeah, I put together the Season 2 Starfleet uniform for the channel and updated the thumbnails. I actually did one, 2 even, of the Picard's dark Confederacy general uniform that looked pretty good. The problem is they're so much darker on YouTube that it was just black with N squared on it, and it wasn't a very good logo. It's not recognizably Starfleet. I mean, it was good, but as a logo, yeah, it's not recognizably Starfleet. And so I tried making it lighter. It didn't work. Even with Picard, the red is relatively dark, and I oversaturated both of them. It's too bright, but it's still really hard to tell. You probably haven't even noticed that the Picard uniform changed. But hey, Strange New Worlds is next, and I've made that logo as well. We don't have to deal with that. But yeah, I'm just gonna get straight into the episode, and let's hope it's one of the good ones, eh? It's you. Sorry, I was just getting some rest before the review. I had this really weird dream, right? You wouldn't believe it. Hitler was there. I know, that Hitler. I was surprised too. I was like, Hitler, what are you doing here? What is this? And he told me, basically, it was really weird, but Hitler is actually super remorseful about what he did, right? He was apologized, he's remorseful, he really wishes he could give it back, and he actually had really complicated and perfectly valid reasons to do what he did in life. And yeah, I've forgiven Hitler, basically. Or at least that's what modern Star Trek seems to believe the world works, because that happens a surprising amount of times. It was a bit different with Data, when Picard actually did talk to a Data, just not the one that sacrificed himself for Picard. You had Book and his dad, where Book made up with his dad because he imagined his dad made up with him. You've had Picard make up with his dad because he imagined that his dad had valid reasons for doing what he did and was actually super remorseful. I feel like I had another example when I was watching this, I don't remember, but like that's not really how the world works, guys. Like, is evidenced by the fact that no one, I mean, okay, I'll admit, I didn't actually have a dream where Hitler was remorseful. I actually just turned around and pretended to fall asleep. But that's not how the world works. But that's not the point I wanted to start with, right? That's just, I just have that intro. It's like, well, that only works as an intro. At least someone didn't break into, like, the Picard house. You know, I'll give him that. Like, I was really afraid maybe Picard's dad was going to be some sort of abusive husband. I actually, this isn't why I'm wanted to start, but we'll just keep going. So Picard's mom had some sort of mental ailment, right? That gave them manic episodes every so often, okay? But she refused treatment. Is that a thing you can do? Like, it in that state, and especially, like, in the 24th century, is that a thing you could do? I suppose it would depend as well if she's a danger to others. And like in the 24th century, how easy must that be to cure? Especially if it's genetic. Like, why would she have it in the first place? I mean, that's just kind of weird. We need more, but ultimately, I don't know if it'll really be satisfying. Welcome back to episode 1. What I really wanted to start off is, this one was just dull. It's not going to be a long review because it was just dull. First off, when we started, and I spent a lot of this episode in his mind not really knowing what was happening. Like, you open with that therapy session in what, by God, is the worst offense at an attempt of a Deep Space Nine era uniform ever. Like, oh my God, what is that? You've printed a vague recollection of the uniform on some paper and put that on your body. What the hell was that? You could have bought... You probably sell them, but you could have bought, and by you I mean Paramount probably sells them, but you could have bought a cheap-ass Deep Space Nine cosplay that was better than that. Holy... Okay, I've got to prepare for Strange New Worlds by being less explicit. But anyway, I'm like, is this a flashback? Is this entirely made up in his head? Is it a mix? Like, I guess if that was his dad, who's a Beta Z, except without the eyes, and it's his dad, so clearly not Betazoid. I was really confused on that. Like, what were we watching? You know, and if we were watching an actual flashback, then, like, you know, it's more that ruining the TNG era's utopia, because, like, nothing about that was okay. And it just had a lot of stuff weird. Like, even your closest friends call you Captain. Well, like, for one, this is the show where Raffi says JL, which is not Captain. They also call him Admiral now. I guess not his, like, TNG buddies, but, like, Rios calls him Admiral and those people. So it's kind of not acknowledging the right now. It's kind of stuck in the past. So that implies it's a flashback. It's not happening now, but he's in his suit, which implies this is the now. Or it's like now Picard in a flashback therapy session. But also, like, yeah, they call him Captain is a sign of respect and admiration, not because it's his job, because he's earned the respect of his closest friends and their admiration, to the point where when he's an admiral is his job, they still call him Captain. But also, it felt like the explanation for what was up with his mom. I mean, clearly it's not over yet. Like, when he was talking the story about the princess and they were dressed up, I thought that was an actual flashback, but then they kind of talked where, like, Picard was a prince. They're all Picard, but, you know, the Jean-Luc was a prince. So I'm like, is this actually, like, this maybe flashback, maybe analogy guy doing a therapy session is making up this story completely on the spot, like this is some made-up realm? Or is it a flashback, like he's telling a real story and they were cosplaying? It was just very confusing. And I'm sure there was meant to be an era of confusion in the direction. Like Discovery Season 3, its first episode did that, where its direction was incredibly disorienting, intentionally so. I can't remember how well they pulled that off, but here it just had the effect of I bounced off so hard. It was very hard not to look at my phone all throughout this episode, because I just don't have any idea what's happening, and they're sending mixed messages. Like, you can't not acknowledge what's happening in the present, but have Picard dressed in the present and have the counselor in a Deep Space Nine era uniform, and it's just all. Did he even call him Captain? I after the episode, I don't even know what that scene was. And then meanwhile, you got the real world stuff where, again, the problems that really should be the sort of technical, solvy Star Trek stuff just kind of get braved away. Like, the ship has been encrypted by the Borg. How did she get control of the ship we plugged her into? The solution? Oh, Seven just remembers the code. And fair that this Borg queen might not remember that Seven was assimilated. She kind of has knowledge of both realities, it seemed. But, I'd accept that. And so she wouldn't do an algorithm Seven didn't know. But also Seven's weirdly, like, having the entire knowledge of the collective, yet also the Voyager episode that established that's bad for her. And, like, no human brain could hold that. That's Voyager problems, I suppose, not that Picard's just continuing. Yeah, and then you just had generally more cliche. Really, what this felt like, I actually did a tweet. Now that's what I call inner conflict. With the scene where Seven and Raffi genuinely were just two writers discussing the characterization of Seven and Raffi, but completely disjoint from, like, what any viewer actually sees. Like, if we're not told that Seven and Raffi are a couple, like, I'd say constantly, but, every now and then, would we honestly know? They held hands at the end of season 1 of Picard for some reason, because I'm pretty sure they'd never even spoken to each other before that scene. Then we're told they're not really together anymore. I'm kind of confused on that point, because Raffi, I don't know, but it's like, a lot of scenes in here felt like the writers just talking about Picard. You had the scene where the therapist dad was braiding Picard about, like, but what, like, drives you? What are you hiding? Is it a darker Picard? It's like, this is just a writer going up to Alex Kurtzman pitching Star Trek Picard. And it's all the pitches that are like, this isn't really what you should do for the show. I've read this morning an article about Michael Yeoh with Section 31 and how it's going to be a different kind of Star Trek, and genuinely in 4 years I've never seen someone positive about it, and looking forward to it even. There was one guy on the Reddit today who's like, I wouldn't mind, and that was it. But that's the positive Reddit that'll ban, like, even the slightest lighthearted jab at modern Star Trek. And so everyone was kind of explaining that this is why the show doesn't work for Section 31, and so I'm kind of in that mindset. It wasn't even a particularly good one, either, because it was so disjoint from what I feel is actually happening, what I'm seeing, and what I kind of get from the general vibe of the community. It just felt like when Chris Chibnall sat down and explained the plot of Flux. It was like, okay, why is it episode 7 and I'm hearing a pitch for the show I've been watching? And you had so many cliche lines, even when the doctor lady asked Rios, are you from space? And in my head, I'm like, don't say you work in space. I can't remember who's actually said that line. It might even be a Star Trek, I'll admit, but I feel like I've heard that line so many times, like, please don't say you work in space. And I was so glad when he's like, oh, no. He's like, I'm from Chile, but, and I'm like, oh, he's going to say he's from the future. He's like, I just work in space. I'm like, ah. And then the other part of the show, as soon as I remember it, okay, yeah, it was Rios and the doctor lady blatantly violating the timeline because either Rios is staying behind or she's going to the future. Probably Rios staying behind just for the season 3 cast to have room, because you don't want to add the wife and kid I'm moving this relationship rather quickly. And just a lot of scenes that didn't make sense. Like, Rios, I know you've got good instincts about me. I'm like, really? Put yourself in the shoes of this woman. And I guess he's a good looking guy, I suppose. But, like, has he done anything? At best, he's kind of naive. But he's done so much where, like, he's the most suspicious, dangerous seeming guy on the planet right now. And I think finally for my general thoughts, yeah, they brought Guinan back. The old Guinan, or I suppose the young Guinan. But, and they kind of tried to explain, the connection with Q and Guinan because they knew they had to. And they did it in the most hand-wavy, we need this for our plot, wishy-washy, this doesn't make any sense way possible. That's probably allegory, but I don't think they mean it. That just crazy complicates both, but particularly Illyrian societies, and just doesn't... What? But that's not even my biggest problem, because my biggest problem is, thousands of years ago, the Illyrians and the Q got together, and they had peace talks, and we had these peace talks over a bottle. This bottle that I happen to have with me right here, because I was the Illyrian who just happens to have this bottle. I know I've left Illyria? I don't know. I know I've left the home world. I'm not even in the same quadrant. Maybe the Borg assimilated them already. I don't know. But I'm the one who just has this. And if any Illyrian ever needs to summon a Q, they've got to come to Earth on the other side of the galaxy and meet with me, and then we can summon a Q. And all that. And it didn't even work. What? What was the point of that half-assed attempt to like solve a decades-old mystery that's not really gonna satisfy anyone, and really just kind of leaves more questions open anyway, to not even have it do anything? Did they just want the special effect? Is it gonna have worked, but Q just got like a text, and he's like, oh, I can't teleport there, I guess I gotta make my way an hour's drive to LA or something, I don't know. It was just dull. Not very good in the references all throughout. I read another thing on the sort of Reddit for the people who hate modern Star Trek that was in very bad taste, but had some points of, Star Trek's kind of learned all the wrong reasons. Sorry, Paramount's learned all the wrong lessons from Lower Decks, where they kind of gone, wow, Lower Decks is successful references, it almost feels. And not the reasons that Lower Decks are actually successful with the references on the cherry on top. And I've noticed that a lot more in this episode. I made a jab before where I said his cousin Renee, because everything's just a reference now, I guess. Laris, we'll call her, because I still don't know her name, enters Picard's mind and is greeted by just a bunch of random best hits and random quotes, I guess, from just random episodes of TNG. And I'm like, why? What's this recognizing? Is it his inner demons? Because you had Locutus, you had Chain of Command, but you also had, I'm not going to remember the name of the episode, but that society that made, they programmed soldiers for a war. Then after the war, they just put them on the moon because they were killers and didn't want to deal with him. Remember that impactful moment in Picard's life? A few of you probably don't even know what episode I'm talking about. It's Lower Decks referenced the villain of that episode is like the most powerful Star Trek villain, and even everyone in Lower Decks was like, who the hell is this? And I had to look him up as well, and I was like, oh yeah, that guy. I put a picture of him up, but honestly, I have no idea what his name is. And yeah, again, I just got the feeling of a lot of scenes where it's like, look how clever I am. It's like, you're not, though. But yeah, it was dull. I don't have much to talk about. Apparently I have 17 minutes worth of stuff to talk about it. But, scene by scene, nah, you know what? There's something I missed from last episode, where, Renee had the life-changing experience, the speech with Picard, that I'll defend for my whole life. The 30-second pep talk is, I saw a headline call it. Then yeah, she decides to keep the mission. She goes out with a nice old man, who then from her perspective, sacrifices her own life to save her, which I feel is like an incredibly traumatic life experience that would kind of undo the immediate effects of Picard's talk to Renee. You could say that it maybe becomes well, I've got to do this for that nice old man. I kind of hope something gets addressed there. You think even the Q is apparently the NASA psychologist would go, this is such a traumatic life experience, Renee cannot fly, and go with the backup crew. I don't know. That one just struck me as weird, and I forgot to bring it up in the last review. You know what, honestly? I gave you an hour and a half last time. I'm just dull. I've got better things to do today. We're not doing the scene by scene. I'm just going to go off the highlights of what I remember. Kind of forgiven, where at the end it turns out she was Romulan, but when she put on her little ear thing, and it was just that Romulan ear, I went, really, guy? Like, really? It's sort of a foreshadowing thing, because it actually was fitting over a real ear that was there. But I did point out, she did have the Romulan tablet quite clearly. Like, it was set up, but it's again a thing of, if you end with that resolution, especially if you're doing your series not as a binge, but you're releasing an episode a week, you also have to write for those people who don't know the resolution yet. And so what should be like a clever, the way you kind of should do it is it should be a clever hint when you go back. Like, if you watch Picard Season 2 again, on your second watching, you'd notice, oh my god, the Watcher's tablet was Romulan. Like, the best example is Steven Universe, which I won't spoil it, but Steven Universe I've praised as the best show of all time, beyond perfect. Quite literally, because I called it perfect and then it got better, and I'm like, well, what do I do now? But it's a pretty good, but generally it's not a show that would earn the perfect on its first season, but it's a show where you watch the first season, and then the end of the first season, second to last episode, I think, you learn something about a character that fundamentally changes them. And then, at least I did, for reasons, I can't remember why, I went back and watched the first season immediately. But when you do that, you'll realize it's like a 50-episode season. From the beginning, there are obvious and overt references to this fact about this character that, even not knowing it, you can't believe you didn't register and it all. I won't give examples because it truly is fantastic. And giving the examples would spoil it. And my token example isn't even about this character, but beyond that, there's also little hints where once you know this fact, you'll see it just random details where it's a universe. You'll go, oh my god, they knew. It's a universe that knows its story and knows its characters, and it just lives like that. You're not, and it just accepts that and does it in such a way where you won't really realize, but it's so satisfying to go back. And even all the way towards the end of the series, I remember the kind of big twist, which again I won't spoil, in the end of that series of like 5 seasons, when they did it, I turned to my partner and went, who'd already seen it again, I went, if I went back and started this series again, how early would I see hints of this big twist like many seasons on? And they said almost immediately. Because it's that's how you do it, is you have to plan for kind of both the people who will go through initially but still have a satisfying going back. The best oh I'm so clever moments, they shouldn't be obvious on your first watch through. The actually clever shows are the ones where they're really good and then you go back and you go, oh my god, this is the most clever show ever. Deep Space Nine will fake it, because Deep Space Nine is famously written on the seat of the pants. Even those final 10-part arc, they wrote the first 5 episodes in parallel, right? It was, God knows, Deep Space Nine does not deserve to be as good as it is. It should be a dumpster fire, because they wrote those first 5 episodes of that last 10-part arc in parallel, and we're constantly having to change each other's scripts, because they did them separately, largely. They kind of assigned different people to different scripts, and then after those 5 episodes, they sat down, they finished all of them, they committed them, they sat down and said, now what? Because they didn't know how it was going to end. And all the kind of setup and positioning they did, this includes in junction to this episode, the one where they set up Bashir and O'Brien going into someone's memory, they didn't write what was actually going to happen. They just set that up and went, now what? Because that's how Deep Space Nine was written. But Deep Space Nine lucked out and has a lot of references like that. There's an early reference, the Three Vipers one, with the prophecy with the wormhole, where Sisko asks, what are the other prophecies about the emissary? And then the dialogue fades away because the episode ends, but you'll hear the, Vedic, that's what they're called. You'll hear the Vedic describe a prophecy that is a pretty good summary of the final episode of Deep Space Nine, albeit incredibly vague and could probably summarize any finale, but it's just the details that are shockingly close. If you watch the episode here, I don't remember. It's the one, the Three Vipers, Comet, whatever. Google Deep Space Nine Three Vipers, you'll get it. But it's amazing. And in Deep Space Nine lucks into a lot of that where it seems clever, and an actually clever show like Steven Universe does it. A contrary would be, I suppose, Stephen Moffat of Doctor who is very, a lot of people say his writing is kind of showing off. It's like, look at how clever I am. And he is clever. Yeah, his writing is clever. He's a clever guy. But a lot of people will kind of complain he kind of does it too much, and it becomes sort of all that the show is about, and after a while, I don't know, you just want something fresh. I don't see it as much in Moffat, because, he's a good writer. His stories are still good, by and large. But, that's kind of feels more writing for the first time viewing should be, look at me, I'm so clever. And that doesn't quite work as well. It's still better than nothing, than dull. It's better than not being clever. But you shouldn't write scenes for look at me, I'm so clever, because it's just doesn't work. It's how you get lines like, now that's what I call inner conflict. Which, if you don't know, that's a Timeless Child? Doctor Who? It's either Timeless Child or the episode before it, in which the Doctor literally describes the inner conflict of the main antagonist and then says the lines, now that's what I call an inner conflict, which you don't have characters do because it takes you out of it. This episode, again, did scenes where, I hate every time, and even in classic Star Trek, because classic Star Trek did this, when they have a character in sci-fi reference how they hate sci-fi. They never like it. But it's like, oh, yeah, I'm watching a sci-fi. Picard hates sci-fi. I think, actually, that was Picard Season 1 that did it. Picard hates sci-fi. Why? Because it's Star Trek, and that's funny. It's not, guys. It's really not. Anyway, we were going to do my fake scene. Oh, yeah, that's what started this. It's the ear thing. My fake little scene by scene. And we're done. That's it. Is there more I want to mention? Certainly. But it's happened a few times. Every now and then, there's just been an episode of all the shows, maybe. I don't think Prodigy had a dull one. It had a bad one, not a dull one. Lower Decks had one I think I found kind of dull. But when a dull episode lands, people say a lot. The worst thing an entertainment can be is dull, because you failed. Even an awful episode, at least you feel something watching it. The only episode of Star Trek I skip in my watch-throughs is Shades of Grey. And there are worse episodes than Shades of Grey, but I'll often cite it as the worst because it's just dull. Threshold is bad. The Sound of Thunder is horrible and morally questionable. I mean, heck, this season is largely not great, horribly questionable, but I am still here. When an episode is dull, you've wasted your time. When an episode is bad, you've spent your time poorly, but when it's dull, you've wasted it. And I think I want to end on a quote Mike McMahon gives a lot, in that, there are Star Treks people prefer, there are Star Treks that some people think are bad, fine. But I'm going to paraphrase. He says it a lot different times. But basically, he has a philosophy that the world is better when there's a Star Trek on, and there should be a Star Trek on, and always, and that's what's important. I disagree with that statement. I do. Because fundamentally, it's kind of an argument of quantity over quality. Not quite, because of course you can, in theory, have really great television for huge amounts of times. Again, look at Doctor Who, or heck, even Star Trek, which even if you hate the newest stuff, is still like a good 40, 50 years of quality entertainment. But there's the point where, if you're making something in the Star Trek world and it's giving concerns about morality, not in the Star Trek way, but in like the messages this show are sending are concerning, or it's not a particularly entertaining show and is dealing with the established lore in a way that potentially is just kind of muddying things, or meaning that someone else can't do it better later. Like, again, the whole Q Guinan history. Is it really better? I remember when early Discovery was on, which I really don't like early Discovery. And I mean, a lot of people don't, it's fair. Some people do. But I'm like, I wouldn't have said it's better. Like, as a collective, modern Star Trek, I feel you really have to analyze each series and in some level each season on its own. But when I sit here on a show that I'm concerned about its message, I'm not particularly enjoyable, not particularly that sort of Star Trek style, and now it's just dull. Is it really better to have this show on? Because part of the reason this review is so short, and I'm about to wrap it up now because I see that counter ticking up on my camera, is I've got better things to do with my day than take it up with this. Anyways, thanks for watching. No, actually, one more thing. Yes, the audio quality is significantly worse because I'm actually setting up for the edit. Because I realized there was more and more comment I really wanted to make, is that honestly, I felt the same as how I feel with modern Doctor Who. I had a moment early on where it's like, I feel I really, to get through this, want some sort of companion thing, like the Fuck Yeah Doctor Who podcast I've talked about, to just help me get through. And like that would make this more enjoyable, where I can kind of talk about it, discuss it, and I'm like, oh, that's me, isn't it? Why don't I get to enjoy my content? I like making these, but I want to be you guys. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. For some reason, I don't really know why, but I hope you enjoyed this one. A bit weird, but I'll see you next time.